the AFC game, I don't know where that goes. Like, okay, play out the injury stuff. Like, Tooney doesn't play. Andrews and Humphrey are going to play. We get to the day of the game. Like, is it 4? Is it more than that? Like, I just.
I'll say in between 3.5 and 4 is my guess.
Because we're really like 4 right now. I know like MGM's dealing 3.5. Like, we're 4. That's what this is. There are no 3.5s that are just anything close to like what you would want to bet, versus like the 4s that are available right now. So we already went 3.5 to 4. I think the Chiefs are going to get negative injury news. Does it go up a little bit more? I don't know. I just that one's like puzzling to me, just because it's literally a point spread that is not tied to any rating, any projection, and like Pizzola's probably got really smart numbers because he makes the game a little less. There's nothing you'll find scouring the internet that would tell you the difference between these teams is remotely this number. I mean, that's not what it is. Baltimore's played way better than this. And so when you have this point spread that's like not tied to something, for example, every college basketball point spread is on some level tied to KenPom. The openers are the KenPom numbers because they're publicly available. You put out openers, you can be close enough, put the KenPom number out, adjust it a half point for injuries or what you think is going to like kind of something recent with the team. One team's playing well, one team's not, whatever, something like that. This isn't tied to anything. It's a really weird betting market. And it just, again, it kind of goes back to like, what do you value? If you think that the games in the regular season are predictive of what this game will be, then Baltimore will smash Kansas City. They will win by a lot of points in this game because they've done that against every elite opponent they've played basically so far this season, and they played much better over the balance of the season. Or if you're like, well, I don't care about that. I only care about either how the teams are playing recently or how they played previously in the playoffs, then you have a lot of questions about Lamar Jackson, and then you have the best player on earth on the other side. And it's just those two things like constantly running into each other and people having strong opinions, and I don't know who wins.
What are some bets that you like here coming up for the Chiefs and the Ravens in the prop market? Anything tickle your fancy? Anything you're leaning towards, etc. here coming up in the AFC title game?
Yeah, I've made 2 prop bets in this game so far. Both of them are unders. So the first one is one that I don't know how people are going to feel about. Mecole Hardman under 1.5 receptions. I mean, the guy stone cold stinks, first off. But second off, I mean,
he should never touch the ball again. So, like, I like the bet just based off that.
Right. I mean, literally touched the ball twice, fumbled through the end zone, nearly cost him the game. The game before that was in Miami, had multiple deep balls where he was like, you know, Mahomes is visibly upset because he didn't adjust to the ball in the air. You know, like Mecole Hardman doesn't belong in an NFL field. He couldn't even crack the Jets like starting receiving core, and they have like Garrett Wilson and a bunch of bums out there. So I don't know. I think that was crazy. I know they brought him in because he has experience with the system and whatnot. Kadarius Toney looks like he's coming back. So I think that any of the design plays will probably be, you know, to him, maybe some more MVS after playing, I mean, the best game of the season, which isn't saying much for him, but, you know, whatever. He had a good game. So, yeah, I think Mecole Hardman probably shouldn't even see the field. And if he does, 1.5 reception seems like a lot. I also played Zay Flowers under on his receptions at 4.5. It's getting a little juicy now, but I still think it's a solid look here. Mark Andrews practiced in full. At this point, I would just wait until Mark Andrews is officially cleared, because last week he practiced in full twice and then they didn't clear him. This week he's already practiced in full multiple times, and then Harbaugh still has not officially said that they're, you know, designated to return and playing this week. So if he plays, though, Zay Flowers splits, his target share decreases a lot, and he hasn't been as good against 2 high coverages. With Mark Andrews, just a 16% target share against 2 high coverages this season, which obviously is a lot lower, and I expect the Ravens to go run heavy. So limited volume, more competition, tough defense. So a lot of things working against him in this spot.
Connor, just one more question on the Chiefs before we can do the NFC game. Like, so you gave us a couple guys who you think are going to underperform, including Mecole Hardman, which is just really funny because he fumbled through the end zone and it's under 1.5 catches, which is really funny. It's basically like, will they make the mistake of throwing him the ball and then compound that by maybe throwing it to him again in the same game? It's basically like the bet that you're making. You're saying, no, they're not going to do that. The Chiefs have found a lot of success kind of by like restricting the number of players who touch the ball. I know Hardman fumbled through the end zone, but he also only touched the ball a couple times in the game. And it's been just like a really, really heavy dose of like Rashee Rice, Isaiah Pacheco, who's beat up but like going to play in the game, and Travis Kelce. And they all have like big stat line games in the last few weeks, each kind of like showing out a couple times. And their prop markets for this game, I think, are pretty interesting. Like Kelce and Rashee Rice are both like in the low 60s, and I didn't see a number on Pacheco. Actually, I could probably just get that right now. But like my
64
point is just
and a half.
the Chiefs
I think I last saw.
Yeah, there you go. 64.5. So kind of like three players who are aligned almost in an identical range. Basically, like if you had to pick one of those three players who have both been seeing the ball a ton recently to pop against the Ravens, if people want to play an over in the game, which Chief would you go with?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm figuring out, because I got to have some overs, because people like to bet those, at least just for
I'm
fun.
Just saying, like somebody's going to play well, like somebody's
right, exactly. No, I think Pacheco is probably my favorite look. I think the rushing receiving combined is interesting. 85, he has that in 5 or 6 straight games since Jerick McKinnon went out. They're using him a ton. Like I mentioned, this Ravens run defense is like their one weakness. Also, running out of the gun, they have not been very good against either. So I think that we could see the Chiefs spread it out a little bit more. They've been playing some heavier packages more with like Noah Gray. I think they might go away from that, play a little bit more spread. Maybe Mecole Hardman sees the field, unfortunately, but I don't think he's going to get the ball. It'll be a lot of spread. Pacheco runs, and I think you'll see a ton of work in the passing game as well. So I think over 85.5 combined is a pretty solid look.
A lot of Niners loving the market. Got bet from 7 to 7.5. In some places, now we're kind of between the two numbers. Maybe that's because Debo's going to play. Maybe it's because people just like the Niners in the game anyway. 51.5 the total. We got plenty of time left. What do you like in the NFC game? Sounded before we came on, maybe you had a stronger opinion on this one.
Yeah, I do. There's something I like in this game, and that's the San Francisco team total over. That's the most confident look I have for this game. We could start on the Detroit side of the ball. I know a lot of people are very focused on the way that the Lions tend to attack the middle of the field on offense, right? That's been brought up a lot this year. Jared Goff's percentage of outside pass attempts is 38.6%. That's the lowest mark in the entire league, and that's typically where you'd beat the 49ers, is on the outside. If you look at the 49ers EPA per play success rates on defense, defending the middle of the field, they are by far the best in the league. It's not even remotely close. On top of that, Jared Goff doesn't operate in shotgun all that much relative to other quarterbacks in the NFL. They run a lot of single back formations, the Detroit Lions, which the 49ers have a very strong EPA and success rate against that type of offense as well. So now comes down to, can Ben Johnson change this offense up enough over the course of a week where they can attack the 49ers' weaknesses? I don't actually know the answer to that. Typically speaking, he is a very good coordinator at coming up with game plans that target the weaknesses of the opposing defenses, but I don't want to bet that, like, whether that's going to happen or not. I'm just confident that San Francisco is going to score points. And whether that's Debo playing or not, like, Debo is very much trending towards playing right now, but I think people really overstate the impact that he has on this team. I've seen all the EPA splits from this year. Here's Debo on the field versus off the field. Well, guess what? When he wasn't there, neither was Trent Williams this year, who's also happens to be like one of the best left tackles in the history of the NFL. That kind of has an impact as well. On top of that, Brock Purdy's wide receiver target share this year, 52.5%. That's like 5% lower than league average. They have other weapons that they can use outside of Debo Samuel. The thing for me is that I think Detroit's defense is extremely overrated. And like, I know nobody says the Lions defense is good. Like, that's not a thing. But I think in the minds of people, they're just not that bad. And I'd argue that they are that bad. What's happened in the last 5 or 6 weeks here in the NFL is that the Lions defense has really capitalized off of turnovers. But outside of that, they're just giving up way too much. Yards per attempt to Baker, Matthew Stafford, Nick Mullins, 2 games, Dak Prescott, even Russell Wilson in the game prior to that, through the roof. Early down pass rate success for those teams, pretty high across the board, averaging 50% early down pass rate success against the Lions in 6 games. That's very predictive of offense going forwards, not the third down stuff and the turnover stuff that's happening. So we look at San Fran last week. They struggled quite a bit. I mean, how much of it was Brock Purdy in the moment, not knowing how to, that experience, his 7th round pick, doesn't have a ton of playoff experience. How much of it was the rain? I honestly watched the game. I think a lot of it had to do with the rain and him just not being all that comfortable in that offense with the rain. And the final point I'll make with the Detroit defense, they missed 124 tackles this season. That was the 5th most in the league. That's a recipe for disaster against the 49ers. The 49ers have 6.6 pass yards after completion this year. That's tops in the NFL by a mile. If you can't tackle, you're not going to beat the Niners. They're just very good in open space. So I think San Fran is going to score in this game. There's likelihood, like possibility that Detroit keeps up. I just don't want to bet the spread when I'm just more confident in one team's ability to move the ball, and I don't know what's going to happen with the other team. So that's the way I'm looking at it, 49ers team total over.
I'm curious how much you get this. I'm 40. I started playing football video games literally in 1991, Tecmo Super Bowl. And I grew up in New York, but the team that I would use exclusively in Tecmo Super Bowl was your run and shoot Houston Oilers. Haywood Jeffries was my favorite receiver to throw to. Obviously, those great receivers with Lorenzo White. Basically can name like every player on that team. You guys had electric offenses in the 90s. And just my opinion as a student of football history, someone who loves this stuff, it's like people always look back fondly on like the K-Gun Bills because they got to a couple 4 Super Bowls, obviously, right? And some great offenses from that era. Just kind of my opinion, Warren, that I don't think the run and shoot Oilers, right, your Oilers offense kind of gets the credit that I think it deserves. Now, I'm not saying that matters to you. You're a Hall of Famer, right? You've gotten the plaudits, etc. Do you ever think, though, that history should look more fondly back on some of those offenses that you were a part of during your career?
Well, yeah, I like to think that we were really innovative for our time. And, you know, a lot of people thought we were more of a gimmick, that offense. But if you look at what offenses are doing today in professional football and over, say, the last 10 years, is basically what we did in the run and shoot. The route concepts, the type of throws that you're making, these back shoulder throws and things like that, they never did that until we started doing it with the run and shoot back in the 90s. The spread offenses that you see today, 4 and 5 wide receivers, that's what we did in the run and shoot. So the only thing that's different is they do it from a drop back, and they do it with a tight end on the field today because a lot of these tight ends are hybrids, so they could be almost like a wide receiver the way they can run, but they also have the size to play tight end, and you could run the football with them where we've never had a tight end on our roster. That was one of the big differences. So I really like what we did and the way we added to what's going on in professional football today. Yeah, do we get enough credit? No. I think if we would have won a Super Bowl or something like that, we probably would have gotten more credit. But because the Super Bowl is such a big accomplishment these days, if you don't do that, it doesn't mean you're good enough anymore. So I think that's the biggest reason why we don't get the credit we deserve is because we didn't win a championship with that offense. But we definitely were exciting, and you talk to anybody that played against us, we were difficult to stop.
Very recently, like in the last 10 days, Wembanyama started like all the favorite flipped again, and he became a favorite, and his price has gotten bet out really aggressively in the last like 48 hours, partly because of his performance last night, and partly because of the stat line that he put up when the team gave up 70 points to Joel Embiid the other night. And I think if you listen to kind of like reporters that cover the league talk about this, my sense is that Wembanyama is going to win this award, and even some of the reporters who were like much more bullish on Chet and just wanted to acknowledge that he's having this like really outstanding season are sort of now admitting, even on social media or in the content that they produce, that like Chet's ahead now, but like literally this is them saying this, like Chet's ahead now, but won't be ahead at the end of the season. And they're almost like resigned to the fact that Wembanyama, I think they almost wanted to give it to Chet, and that Wembanyama just, if the stats are going to look like this, that it's just eventually it's not going to be close, and it's close right now. Now, there are two things that created this. One is the move from Wembanyama from power forward to center, which has like enabled him to accumulate some really ridiculous stat lines, rebounding and blocking shots, and just like gives him, I think, the ability to have bigger stat lines. And then Popovich even announcing last night that he was going to start playing more minutes sometimes, which again, more minutes, handicapping the NBA prop markets especially is almost entirely about minutes and how many minutes everybody's going to play and who's going to play less or more than they have been before. If he's going to play more, the stats are going to go up. He's going to look even better.